want to welcome all of you to our virtual meetup as part of survivingbreastcancer.org. I am so thrilled that you guys are taking time out of your day to not only connect with each other in our amazing community, but also to come and get amazing content and meet each other. Because what I'm realizing in this amazing Surviving Thrivers Breast Cancer Warrior tribe, we all actually have like real lives outside of our diagnosis, right? Like this is not just our identity, even though, as you guys know, I like totally identify with it, but we all have such great talent, such great backgrounds, such great experiences that like let's tap into that, right? Like we are literally a tribe that just rocks on so many levels. So I'm so excited tonight to partner with a couple amazing friends and speakers and colleagues for tonight's presentation and talking about surviving your first draft. So I know a lot of times too in surviving breast cancer, I talk to a lot of people of like, how do I cope? How do I come to terms with things? How do I make sense of everything that we have gone through? And a lot of times you hear, especially in support groups, do you keep a journal? Are you writing this? Oh, I'm not a writer. Have you started a blog? No, why would I blog? Like, like I'm fatigued. I'm tired. Like the last thing I want to do is like have to worry about my writing, right? But, after some time passes and we've created these journals or we've created these experiences, how do we make sense of all of this and then take a very personal experience, whether it's breast cancer or whether it's some other experience that you've had, you have something to say and that is of value and we need to get it out there. We need to let people know and we want to help as many people as possible. So that's really why I'm so excited that we're able to gather here tonight. So this evening we have, actually, I love how organically this grew as well. We have Dr. Carol Weaver, who will be spearheading a couple of the first initial slides, and then we have two special guests with us tonight. We have Leslie Yerger as well as Beverly Zavalata, and they are also experienced authors, thrivers, going out and sharing their story and their mission to really provide education. So we have a wealth of knowledge and information here. And I know later on we'll definitely go around the room, if you will, and do introductions and meet each other. But just who I see online, I mean, we have amazing people in the audience. We have podcasters, we have bloggers, we have social media influencers, we have people who have written books outside of the breast cancer realm, just talking about, grief and dealing with loss in general. We have people who are thinking about writing their first drafts or in the throes of, okay, I wrote it, now what? Do I go with a publisher or do I self-publish? And all of these questions. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to turn things over to our speakers. And Carol, if you want to kick things off.
Hello, I'm so glad we have so many people interested in this. I have to start off with a quote by Lisa Rankin, who wrote Mind Over Medicine. She said that creativity reduces distress and symptoms in women with cancer. So if you've been keeping some kind of a journal and so forth, you're helping your own health. I'm delighted to have with us Leslie and Beverly, because I'm not the guru on how you write or how you write a first draft. It is very much an individual process. And so therefore I'm going to welcome their commentary on how they did it. Both of them have published books on the experience of breast cancer, as I have. So I'm going to defer to them when I make these pronouncements. I called it Getting That First Shitty Draft as a quote from Hemingway, who said, that's what you have to do first. You have to put down in writing the awful prose and the misplaced modifiers and the sentences that don't work before you can do anything else. So I'm focusing, and I hope Leslie and I think Leslie and Beverly will too, on that process. There's much to say about self-publishing, hybrid publishing, getting a copy editor. Beverly just told us about how her process was involved in someone who came in after the first shitty draft and shaped things. we're not going to go really that far. We're just going to talk about how you get to a bunch of papers with your stuff on it. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. And I'm telling you right now that I really have a PhD in English, and I still had a very hard time. I was writing about my experience with breast cancer. I got E. coli in the operating room. I had all these surgeries. It was kind of a mess. It wasn't your garden variety of a small lump, and that was it. So I really wrote about art, how art got me through, and so it's a kind of a distinctive way of getting at the process. In the next slide, Laura, am I?
Yeah, I'll switch that 1 second.
Uh, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to ask you to think about the most important thing for me was to finding a purpose, to figure out why I was going through this agony. For me, it was realizing that I didn't know anything about art, but these 12 or 13 pieces got me through the difficulties in the stages. And then even before that, maybe you're not writing about breast cancer. Maybe you're writing a fantasy novel about not having breast cancer, or you're writing a thriller, or you're writing a fiction that you've always had in your heart, and you want to write this novel with a passion. So that for me is the real beginning of the first draft. The book I'm writing now, and by the way, I'm almost finished my first draft. I will be next week. And every time I look at it, I cringe, but it's almost done. I had to write a purpose statement because I have a coach who's kind of nudging me through, and I'll tell you more about that later. But the purpose of my book, I have metastatic cancer in my spine. So the purpose of my book is, and I have it printed on my computer screen. That's why I'm looking over here. The purpose of my book is to show people with chronic or terminal disease how you can, through a system of spiritual and psychological stances, extend your life and have a vibrant life full of joy and wonder. Now that's kind of clunky, but basically that's what I'm trying to do, is to show people how I'm living a vibrant life despite this kind of death-defying diagnosis, and ways they might adopt to get away from grief and panic and depression and all those things. So getting a why is really important. In the next slide, maybe you'll share that with us a little bit later on if you have a why in your head. On the next slide, I have one of my favorite authors, and I think Beverly said the same thing. And I'm going to let them jump in here after this. Annie Lamott has got a great book called Bird by Bird. I recommend it to everyone writing. In it, she talks about her fourth grade brother who was crying because he couldn't finish an assignment about birds. And his father said, just sit down and first draw a pelican and then put your commentary next to it. Then turn the page and draw a crow and then put your commentary next to it. So she uses that as the metaphor for how you write. You just do it bird by bird. She also has a maxim of keeping one's butt in the chair. Sometimes you just have to just sit there and write whether you like it or not. I say don't worry about publishing because that's not part of this webinar. It could be something later that Laura would like to do. But I do think that what has helped me in this book, this third book, which I didn't have in my first book, is a roadmap. You know, outlines make me go, ooh, ooh. I'm just a sloppier person than that. I hate outlines, but I did come up with a roadmap. That is, I'm going to do these 12. I've got these 12 horrors, from loneliness to intimacy problems, grief, blah, blah, blah. So 12 buckets. And that has been so helpful to me. Now, what do you think? Did you have an outline, Beverly? Did you have an outline?
Um, I did, although it wasn't an outline in the traditional sense. So let me introduce myself a little bit.
Sure.
I'm Beverly Savaleta. I'm an MD. I'm a family physician and breast cancer survivor. I've been no evidence of disease for 4 years, which has been wonderful. And I'm really happy to be here presenting and dialoguing with everybody. So, and I published a book in the fall called Braving Chemo, which is a nonfiction book. And so I wanted to, if you don't mind, go back to the why slide.
Yeah.
I do think that is absolutely fundamental because ultimately the why is going to be what sustains, well, I guess I'll rephrase it. For me, the why is what sustains me through all of the difficulties, which, just like any other project, I think you get really fired up and you have a great idea and you work on it, and then you hit some sort of challenge, or you feel disappointed or angry, you run into roadblocks. And so the more you can return to your why, and it might be several things, then that is what's going to sustain you for the long haul. So
so true.
I think so. For me, my why is that I want to help people who are having chemotherapy feel better during treatment. And so I'm going to write this book to help them educate themselves and take care of themselves. So it's an educational book for patients and their caregivers to know more about chemotherapy and help take care of themselves. So that's the goal. And when I'm feeling frustrated or just like running out of energy, running out of steam, and again, I've already published. It's been almost 3 months now, and so I'm into the marketing phase and book promotion, which is a marathon.
Yeah.
And so I just have to return to those little nuggets of, if I hear about somebody who is being helped by the book or thankful for the book, I return to that. I mean, I actually pull up either positive reviews or emails or little tidbits of information so that it's like returning to the core. It's like touching in with why you're doing what you're doing. So which I think is the same as almost any project that people feel strongly about. It's probably, maybe Laura, for you, your nonprofit work is driven by a passion for service. And so it's similar maybe to that.
Exactly. I read quotes all the time. It's a lonely world sometimes to be on this marathon.
Yeah, right. I believe, I love to read. I'm a reader, I'm a writer. So for those of you who might be writing a different genre that's maybe not so clearly tied to service as something like a nonfiction book, which is more clearly practical, like it's a how-to book or something like that. I believe that art heals and art is wonderful. So even if the purpose is, I'm going to write a book to make people have a great day, awesome. I need that. Everybody needs that. So I really think that however you phrase that why, that's your touchstone. And so anyway, I guess I've probably said enough on that. So
what about you, Leslie?
Yeah, well, well, first of all, my name is Leslie Yerger, and I'm author of Probably Benign. That's my book. It's a very small, little thin book. It's about a 2-hour read. And my why was I want to expose women to the idea and share the idea that while mammograms have done wonderful things for us over the last 5 decades or so that they've been in existence, that if you have dense breast tissue, you really need more than just a mammogram, or you might. And that's where we really need to go. And one of the phrases on my book is a devastating diagnosis, a 500-mile journey, and a quest to advance the next generation of breast cancer screening. And that is my why. It's right on the front of my book. And so I did this 500-mile walk across the top of Spain, and I had a lot of, thoughts and revelations as I was doing that. And I came to understand that this is kind of my calling. And so I talk about the walk, I talk about the calling, I talk about the diagnosis and the advancement of breast cancer screening all woven into one. And so I want women to know that there's more that needs to be done. And so that is my why. As far as an outline, absolutely. That's the first thing that I worked with my co-writer on, was an outline. We did an outline of the book. And did some work on that and agreed back and forth what the outline would be. And then actually we wound up sticking to it. We kind of changed one of the chapters around a little bit from the original outline, but I think spending that time up front on your why and the outline is huge. We did this book in about 4 months, which is pretty fast.
Wow.
And I think it's because of all the upfront work that we did to know what we wanted the book to be like, what we wanted it to say, how we wanted to say it, and what we didn't want to do as well. So I think the upfront work is really, really important. Otherwise, you can really be muddling around a lot and getting frustrated. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here, and this is going to be a fun conversation. And there's no right way and there's no wrong way, really, to write a book. But I think there are some words of wisdom from us and many other people about how to do this. So thanks for everybody for being on. It's great.
Thank you. And what I love about these introductions is that you guys are all coming from different backgrounds, different whys, different techniques for how you all published. So again, I totally agree. They're a very rich conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to one of the things Beverly said earlier, that she did the same thing I did. I wrote my first book and I put it away for quite a while, and then went back to it and needed somebody to help me shape it. So it's true that everybody is different.
Mm-hmm.
So Annie Lamott, Keeping One's Butt in the Chair, Bird by Bird. And then the next author I would recommend is Joanna Penn. This is her website. She writes mostly fictional books, but she does a lot for writers, and has a book that I have right here next to me. It's called Productivity for Authors. It's a skinny book, but it's really packed with all of your concerns, all of the things that do come up. And she spends a lot of time on finding time to write and scheduling and that sort of thing, which I'm not very good at. I write when I can. I mean, people say, oh, you should write every day. I don't do that. I try to do a number of pages a week. But writing every day is difficult for me because of my other projects. Though she does say quite a bit, and so does other people, about how you've got to fight those dragons that are pulling you away from the project. But she is really, really encouraging and offers some very good suggestions. She was an accountant for many years and she hated her job, and eventually she went from 5 days to 4 days a week. And that 5th day she started to write and changed her life. I've heard her speak, and she's very inspiring. She has a blog and a podcast. So she's very accessible on the internet. I don't know. Did you, Beverly and Leslie, did you have any writers that you, people who inspired you, books or websites that you went to while you were writing?
So actually, I listened to her also. I listened to her on the Ally podcast. I belong to Ally, which is the Alliance of Independent Authors.
Yeah.
So I belong to their organization, and then I listen to, they have a variety of different podcasts. So that's Joanna Penn and Orna Ross together.
Yeah.
So you can listen to the podcast without joining the organization. They have a lot of free content, but
Yeah.
then if you want to join the organization, I don't think it's, well, I think it's like $75 a year. So that's not too bad for a year. And then with that, you get a lot of discounts in terms of self-publishing resources like software and publishing things. So that's ALLI for anyone who's interested. I also listened and looked at a lot of content from Dave, the guy who makes Publisher Rocket, which is a software that I ended up purchasing. It's not for everybody, but it's Dave Chesson, and his website is Kindlepreneur. Kindle is in the Amazon Reader product. So that's another good one. So those are two products that that's really more on the self-publishing as opposed to author process, but.
Well, it all does blend
Yeah.
together, and sometimes it's very exciting to read the self-publishing thing.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you know about her, and at the end of this, if you want to send me an email, I can send you a list of other writers, other books on writing that may be helpful to anybody out there. One of the things that she presses on a lot is goals. So I said, I don't try to write every day, but I do make a goal. I'm going to Los Angeles on Thursday, so I've got to have that draft done. I must have this amount of written pages by the time of my birthday, or by the time I go out with my husband in 2 weeks to a special event. So if you give yourself a goal, it doesn't have to be writing every day, but something that makes you feel good after you've accomplished it. The next slide is by Seth Godin, and it brings up a kind of painful thing that sometimes you have to eliminate, and Joanna Penn talks about that too. You have to say to yourself, I can't do everything. I can't do fundraising for my church because I'm writing this book. Or I'll do it for you at a later time. Seth talks about this a lot. You don't want to be busy, you want to be productive. And especially that creative quote by Lisa Rankin. You want to be creative. You have to have those hours. I need about 2. Then I have to get up and get a cup of coffee or something. But 2 hours where you let your mind float and get those paragraphs down. So that's not being busy. That's being productive and creative. And that's what a writer does. A writer gets into those modes as frequently as possible. I think the next slide actually does talk about the goal setting, but as I've said, one of the things, and I'd love to get some reaction to this from my colleague writers, and that is, this is from Joanna Penn. She says you could write 1,000 words in an hour. Can you write 1,000 words in an hour, Beverly, Leslie?
No.
Leslie, go ahead.
I'm going to say no. That's a lot.
I mean, for me, it really depends, because I think I mean, I absolutely have, but I would say that's not typical, like not consistently.
Yeah,
Um,
I would
I think,
agree.
yeah.
You can do it on
So,
days, but
Well, I think you really, I think you could do it if you really had a good idea of what you were going to write and how you
right.
were going to write it. That's the hard part, really, I think, is knowing what it is you want to say and how you want to say it. And then the words will come. So I suppose, 1,000 words an hour or whatever it was you said could happen if all that had happened beforehand. But usually it happens while you're trying to write, which slows you down.
Yeah.
mhm.
Right. Yeah.
In interruptions or
Mhm.
um,
Just not being unsure about what you're going to say.
yes. That's why the outline is helpful because you know you're in this bucket and you should
That's
be
right.
thinking about that. But
Uh-huh.
I think that's a little bit ambitious myself. I figured it out that it's 350 words a page. So it's a little less than 3 pages. Like Beverly, I've had days where I've done that, but not always. Now, there is this, maybe you've heard of it, the NaNoWriMo project, which is every November. Um, there is a project where you write every single day, and the objective is to write 20,000 words in a month or more. And you're in a group, so you check in with one another. And I've known people who have done it, and they say that the writing is horrible, but you can save something from it. That the principle is when you write that much. I used to date a novelist who said, if you write 100,000 words, you do not have grammatical problems. It's just the sheer brute force of writing that many words, which makes you a better writer. And I've noticed myself when I've really put my pedal to the metal and haven't left the study for maybe 4 or 5 hours, something gets easier. There's something that goes into second gear or third gear, but it's hard. Writing is not easy. I don't care how much you've done it, but this NaNoWriMo is an interesting way to spend a month. Every day you leave the laundry to the side, you don't cook many dinners, and you write, and count the number of words. And then you've got the basis of something. So it's the ultimate how to get a shitty draft, I suppose. Um, I'm not sure if it works all the time, but I've known people who do claim that it gets you going.
I would agree with that, Carol, actually. And speaking of like writing every day for a month, I know there's a lot of us also in the blogger space. In October, we try and publish a blog a month, right? Can you go
Do you?
31 days writing some sort of content in terms of breast cancer awareness and publishing? And I have yet to succeed at doing it for 31 days in October, but I challenge myself. It would be amazing to be able to just practice the skill set and the art of communication, of writing, of investigating. And really, but I think by the time, I don't know what the magic number is or whatever that hump is, but I feel like you go over the perfection, right? You no longer become the perfectionist. Your grammar is out the window.
Yeah.
You get into that very creative space of, okay, I talked about X, Y, and Z that are the hot topics. Now I'm on day 27. What can I put in there that my readers still want? And I think that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I tend to try to be a lyrical writer, so I'm into metaphors and similes and that kind of thing. You can't do that when you're pressed.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's value in that, to just get it out there, let it flow as much as possible, and then later on go back and see what you have. Sometimes you'd be pretty surprised at when you're on deadline, for example, what will emerge from you. So this gives you a rough idea that memoir and nonfiction, for example, is shorter than romance or thrillers, 50 to 70,000 words. In children's books, I don't know if anybody out there is thinking about writing a children's book. It's very, very short, but of course you have illustrations, so that's another aspect to it.
Mhm.
How long were your books? Beverly, you said, Leslie, you said yours was quite small.
Yeah, it's pretty small. It's like 100 pages, even with all the, note to the reader and acknowledgments in the back. So it's pretty short. But that's what I wanted. I didn't want a long, thick book. I didn't want it to be off-putting to pick up. People tell me, they get through it in 2.5 hours. And that was my goal. I wanted it to be an interesting read, but a quick read. So, and I tend to be sort of concise, and I use less words to say what I want to say, I think, than a lot of people do. And so it just fits me. It fits me to have a short, action-packed book. And so that's kind of, I guess that's just, part of me coming out in the way that just my being. So it's pretty short.
The publishing industry is now saying shorter is better.
Well, I think with a less attention span that people have these days, I was just thinking if they pick up a big thick book, they're gonna choose a smaller book. So be the smaller book. That was my thought process, right or wrong.
Industry is saying that you're probably right. I just had a query from one of the participants for you to show the cover of the book. Can you do that? And can you do the same, Beverly?
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Can you guys see it?
Probably benign.
Yes. And it's got a picture of the Camino de Santiago trail on it.
That's great.
I laugh and I tell people, no one is ever going to accuse me of plagiarism, because I don't think anybody has ever paralleled, the Camino de Santiago with breast cancer screening before. It's nothing if not unique, So
Beverly's showing her book.
Oh, sorry.
Very official.
oh wow,
there's Braving Chemo.
Wow. Oh God, that contraption. I remember that so well in chemo.
The Ivy pole.
The Ivy pole. Thank you so much. I've suppressed. That's a very
I know.
good-looking cover.
Yes, and I will compile all of these resources and links to all of your books and all of the references to the like the Ally podcast and different resources, because I'm taking notes too, but we can compile an email and I'll send it out to everyone who had RSVP'd, since I have your email addresses.
awesome. Thank you.
So, Carol, I wanted to make a comment about the outlining process, because I did not sit down and make a bullet point roadmap or outline. But what I did start with, and this is a little peculiar, I think when I write my next book, it won't be this way. I had a stack of communications that I had with friends and other people about this topic.
Yeah.
So I had some material that was like notes, because I had been communicating with people about chemotherapy, about my subject matter. Okay. Yep. So about chemotherapy side effects. And it was so I had printed out transcripts of text messages, emails. I had some handouts from like a medical setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this material, and that stack of papers, that stack of notes was what I was using when I started writing.
Right.
And then as I was going through the draft, I was kind of cutting and pasting and moving things, and then I'd go back to another section and I'd write some more if I thought, oh, this really needs to go with that other topic. So I think it functioned in some ways kind of like an outline
Yeah.
because it was subtopics. It sorted itself into subtopics, and we've been talking about this this topic of how to um, get yourself on some sort of schedule or routine of
Yeah.
sitting down and writing. But one thing that has worked for me, and I want to say that I think I got the idea from I wrote it down here. So this is it. uh, and it's terribly messy, but I read years ago a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I'm
Oh,
sure you all have heard of it.
oh, it's wonderful. She's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So actually, Laura, if you want to make like a little resource email to send out a post or something, it'd be great for people. And she has lots of great ideas.
She does.
And one of them was terrible for me, which is what she called morning pages, which
Yeah.
is what Carol said, sit down and write 3 pages every day. And I did that for a month. And it was the worst drivel ever. And none of it ever turned into anything. I mean, it was like 3 pages of just mind vomit, just, I don't know, complaining, or I don't know. It was nothing. It was pointless. So I just decided this is not for me. Like, this process is not my process. And instead, I bought little notebooks and I put them everywhere, everywhere. The bathroom, the kitchen, my bedside table, my car, my backpack, my work bag. And I decided that everywhere I was, no matter where I was, when I had an idea, I was going to write it down. So I did that. And that completely changed my writing life.
Wow.
So this happened about 7 years ago. And of course, it's a disaster because I have like 10 of these things. Plus, I have all the notes on my phone.
I'm kind of glad I'm not the only one. I just have to like, it's like an AA meeting, like me too. I have journals
Yes.
everywhere. And
Yes.
like, here's one, I'm just going to stick with it. No, there's notes everywhere. And
Yeah.
so, like, I'll be in the car and then an idea will show up and I'm like, okay, how do I do the voice record on my phone? So
I've done that too. Yeah. I will, the other thing I do is I email myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I will email myself just like a
Mm-hmm.
random email of like 2 sentences as a reminder to do that. And but it really changed it because it's, number one, I'm writing it down. Number two, I'm kind of putting a pin in it. And it really did change things because then even so back to this book, when I was writing this book over the course of months, I still did that because I've been working. I mean, I work full time. And so when I would go into a work cycle, I really wasn't writing, except that I would go, oh my gosh, I need to include such and such a resource.
right.
Yeah.
And then I would have to write it down. And then a week later, I would get to go back to the manuscript and add it in. But at least I would know that that was somewhere and I could go and look it up and add it in. So I found that technique to be very helpful. So
I just can't believe you mentioned The Artist's Way. I should have said that right from the start. I'm humbled because I must have 10 or 20 journals that I did do the 3 pages, the morning pages, for years and years as a single parent. And it was my, kind of sanctuary. Yes, it in a certain way, it is like a windshield wiper across your mind in the morning.
Yeah.
That it can, you put all the drivel that's in your head, and then you can start the day. It's interesting that I didn't do that when I was writing this book, my first book. So I sympathize with both things, and I have those little notebooks all over the place too.
Do you have like recommendations? I'm just asking in the chat question from Sarah, how much writing a week is a good balance in order to not get overwhelmed or even frustrated? What I'm hearing is that it really depends, which is such an unsatisfying answer sometimes, right? But how do you find what that personal balance is for you?
Well, I'll just share my story and how my book came into being. And that was that I did work with this co-writer. And so the writer would, first of all, I had this self-imposed deadline that I did not meet, but came close to it. I wanted it published in October, and we got mid-December, so that's not too bad. So I was in this big hurry. But he would send me text, and I would basically do what I wanted to do to them. And I was basically just all in for like 3 months, whether I was frustrated or not. So that was my mode, is to just go all in, be all about writing this book, and just keep going until I was done, because I wanted to make this self-imposed deadline. And so, I did not have another full-time job to go to at that time. So I was just all in, and that's how it worked for me. And I know that's not going to work for everybody, but I got it done in 4 months. So that's pretty fast.
Having a co-writer, I think, was also, as it says here, an accountability technique.
Very much so. Yeah, right. Because he would sometimes, text me or call me and say, well, what'd you think of chapter 5? And I kind of needed to have a response for that. So, yes.
I'm a great believer in writers groups. When I went back, as Beverly was saying, she put things aside. When I finally did decide to publish the book, I joined a writers group. There were 7 of us with a writing coach.
Mm-hmm.
We had to have 5 pages every Wednesday.
Oh, well, yeah.
Group. Now, I could have killed myself on Tuesday night. It was still the best thing. In 6 months, I had a draft. So that was my first book. With this book, I am so bad with accountability. I hired a coach whom I speak to every Thursday at 1:00. And there are 5 other people on the call. And you have to read her something, not 5 pages, but something. And that makes you feel like, oh, what did I do this week? Let's just do these 2 paragraphs. At least it says to you, you have to do something every week.
Yeah.
So I think whatever your accountability is, you need something like, I think most people do. Maybe not. If you say you've got 3 months and you have to do it, then you figure it out,
Yeah, I think that my self-imposed deadline, which I convinced myself was it's going to be the end of the world if I didn't meet, which is wrong, totally. The world did not come to an end, and I did not meet it. I was 6 weeks late, which still isn't too bad. But I think that was the best thing that ever happened, because I'd still be diddling over, chapter 3.5. If I hadn't decided this is going to happen this summer, and then I'm going to be done, and then I'm going to publish it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Could we look at the last slide? And because I'd really like to hear from the people who are listening.
I agree.
About what they have and what they are thinking about. Toni Morrison says, right at the edges of the day is a sort of a poetic way of putting it, that I find that if I could do it in the morning, that's the best, before everything starts. And there is actually a group called the 5 a.m. writing group that you can join, and they'll keep you on track. But some people just like to do it. They like to put the kids to bed and sit down at the computer like Joanna Penn did, or go to a coffee shop and put the earphones on and write there. But the statement that you are fighting with a dragon every day or every time you sit down to write, and you have to think of it that way in a way. It's not easy. It is not easy, but it's so worth it, especially if you have a purpose, as our 2 writing compadres did.
Yeah.
All right. So did you have anything to add to that, Leslie?
No, I think it's a great idea to open it up to the people that are listening to see what questions they have or what's on their mind about this.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for providing such a thorough overview about your unique processes, how to get started, some great resources. And I love this ending metaphor of just like the dragon and writing. I think that could relate to so many aspects of our own lives. So I'm going to unmute everybody so that way you guys can like chime in and ask questions. But if you have something going on TV or something in the background, just please mute yourself. But I do want to call upon one of our guests who's here. Let's see, unmute all. There we go. Abby Power. She is a dear friend and colleague as well, and she recently just finished the writing process. So if I can just put you on the spot quickly, if you would like to introduce yourself, and then also what key takeaways do you have from all of this? Does it resonate with what process you went through? I know you just are living in it right now too. So I would love to hear from you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Abby. I know Laura from our day-to-day jobs and from lots of other activities. So thank you for letting me be here.
You presented at our first fundraiser too, like 2 years ago.
Yes,
So
yes, of course. That was so much fun. It was such a great event. Lovely to meet everybody. So as Laura said, I just finished my manuscript. I started writing, I'm actually in a master's program right now, so it actually first started out as my capstone project. So that gave me a lot of direction in terms of I need to get this done. So I had a deadline already in mind, and I didn't want to let anybody down. So I started the research process this summer, and actually the book didn't start out anything I thought what it turned out to be. So it completely changed, and I really gave myself into the writing process and what I wanted to do and what was really in my heart. So it turned into a book really about the death of my father and the grieving process and about loss and all of the ways that I went through the process and what I did to get to this point where I feel ready to fly again in life. So it's called Bluebird. I'm currently in the editing process stage and setting it aside for a little bit just so I can come back at it with fresh eyes before I begin the publishing process of deciding what to do from there. But it was an intense process for me. It was just a lot of work. Mainly, I have a 6-year-old son, and so it was a lot of days at the dining room table, doing my morning pages as well, every morning at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, just to unblock some of those cobwebs and really helped get the ideas flowing. So I also, when I felt stale at my house, I'd go to like a bookshop and a little coffee shop or bookstore just to get the ideas flowing as well. But one thing I've noticed, I had to learn what works best for me, and I realized that all of my ideas happen when I'm in motion. So whether that is when I'm dancing or running or driving in a car or near even running water, it was always in motion. So like everybody here, I had notebooks, post-it notes, note cards everywhere. I still do to this day. And I mean, in my bag at work, in my car, because I knew if I didn't put down the idea right away, it would just fly away and I would never get it back. And sometimes I just drive in my car and just see what pops up for me. And another tip that I did was that I write better when I write to music. So I have to feel the words, and I need to feel that emotion, especially for the topic that I was writing about. I needed to get back into that state of mind of how I felt during that time of my life. So writing to music doesn't work for everybody, but it really works for me, and I see that on the page. So sometimes I have different soundtracks based on the different chapters. So it's interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, it's really a trial and error process. And like I said, right now I'm just giving it some time to breathe again, to come back to it with fresh eyes, because sometimes I just wanted to throw it in the garbage, and I was like, I'm so sick of this. But it's definitely worthwhile, and my book will be the same. It's going to be more of a short 100-page book, so somebody can just pick it up, use it as a resource for any type of loss or grief, and something that they can, really cozy up to. So yeah, it was an intense but really rewarding process. And some days it was hard to have the push to do it, but I did try to, be consistent in writing.
But that's good. That's good.
So there has to be other burgeoning questions out there. Or watch out, I'm going to cold call on you.
Holly, are you still there? Talk about your writing process.
Oh, yes, I'm here. Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So I'm not on camera because I'm not camera ready, like Carol always is. But I will say that I've been reading like tons of memoirs and books about writing. And I'm writing a book about my grandfather, my elusive, mysterious grandfather, who my grandmother burned everything about because she didn't want anyone to really know anything about him, which of course prompted my aunt and I to be like, what? We got to find out everything about him now. But it's sort of becoming this whole story about my 30 plus year search for him through the archives of the internet and actually traveling all over the, not all over the world, but to where he lived. And I'm currently translating his book from German, which I don't know German, but luckily there's the internet that you can try to figure that out with. But I did come across a really great book called Making a Literary Life by Carolyn C., which I would recommend people to read because, I've read a lot of books about, writing these sort of things, but this one is really, really good. And it just goes over every single aspect of what you might be thinking about in terms of the plot, characters. She has a really great position on characters. I'm only halfway through, so I can't tell you the end. And, and I've never written a book yet, so I'm just, going through the process, and I'm very happy to be hearing about the process of all of you guys because, I'm trying to do a couple hours a day. It's very hard. It's very hard to do that, especially I think when you have a very busy life, and especially as a woman. I know it's not politically correct to say that, but I do think that women have more responsibility. And so there's a lot more distraction. So it's very hard to really say, okay, I'm going to do this today. And then someone has to go to the doctor or, there's some crisis or something. So everyone looks to you to kind of deal with it. So
Yeah, someone outgrew their clothes overnight.
That one I haven't come across yet, but
It goes on and on and on.
yeah, it goes on and on. I actually I listen to a lot of books. I don't read, I read a lot, but I also listen to audiobooks, and you can get them free through your library, actually on your iPhone. And so I do this all the time. But I'm listening to Anna Morrow Lindbergh's
Yes.
autobiography right now. It's something about by the sea, something by the sea.
Yes. That's
And
lovely.
I'm only just in the first 2 miles. Right, I walked 2 miles today, and I listened to. So I'm there in that part. Just about, she talks about that very thing that had been going through my mind. So
Is Sheila there? Sheila?
I saw Sheila's picture.
Sheila, are you there? Can you say something about the writing process? You've written a couple of books. Are you there? I think she may have.
I saw her picture for 1 second
Yeah,
for some
me
reason.
too. She may have moved
I think
on.
she-
Anybody else want to give us a little bit of advice and encouragement?
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
Go
William?
ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's two questions. One is about the editing process. Can you describe the various processes that you go through to edit your manuscripts? And two, is there a particular physical place where you feel that you're better at composition?
It's a totally different hat. Editing is a totally different hat. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to separate yourself from the creative area and get a sense of what the book should look like. So it's a completely different process. So William, I think that's another webinar.
Mhm.
Okay.
A lot of people do hire others, at least to do it with them. You know?
Right.
And it's a different kind of agony, I guess. That's why-
Yeah, I mean, I typically edited Laura's doctoral dissertation, and I do all
Oh.
of the edits for the newsletter and a lot of editing for the correspondence and whatnot. And an awful lot of times I get books thrown at me and various pieces of fruit. So I was just curious as to how the process works between the editor and the writer. So maybe we do save it for a future webinar.
Well, as the writer, I have to say thank you for validating my crazy idiosyncrasies of having books posted everywhere. So, William, what I'm doing is totally appropriate. I have a question though for any of our writers out there. Have you ever in your editing process just ever pressed delete? Have you gotten through to a point in like your manuscript?
Oh, yes.
I'm going through like a
Oh, you mean the whole thing?
or like a substantial part? Like, have you gotten to a point where you're like, you know what? I've been writing, this is practice, this is first draft, but I'm on page 50 and now I'm starting to write.
Well, killing your darlings, I have never really deleted that much, but I have deleted chunks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very hard. But that's part of the editing thing. I don't think you should do that in your first draft.
Sure.
You should
So-
put it aside and let it cook. And then,
I did a lot of deleting and starting over.
did you?
Yeah. Not the whole thing, but maybe a section. I'd be like, yeah, you know what? That isn't fitting in. It just doesn't fit in. It might be some good words, but it's not fitting into what I want to say. So out you go. I was pretty harsh with the pen. So yeah, I did do that quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
So I did it a different way. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Still? Okay. I created different versions and would just save new versions, and I had a folder for old versions. And that, I guess, a bit of it's a bit like pack rat process, because I mean, it was very rare that I wanted to go back to an older version, but occasionally, there were maybe just 1 or 2 times where I would go off on a tangent and I would do something, and then I come back and I was like, what was I thinking last week? And so then I would go back a version or 2 versions of a particular section and say, I really think I had it right the first go round.
Mhm.
And then I would pull a big section out and put it back in. It was fairly rare, but for that reason, I didn't want to just totally erase it.
Right.
So it means that I have folders that are full of lots of old versions, and I may purge it at some point, but I guess my recommendation would be not to just totally delete it. In other words, especially if you're writing fiction. I think if you're writing fiction, definitely don't do that. Like, just cut it. I mean, cut it out and then put it somewhere else, give it a label and save it. Think of it just like a big sticky note that you might use later. You know, maybe that character is supposed to be in a different book,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, but don't just delete it.
I think that's good advice. I think com- saving versions in particular is a wise idea, especially before you publish. And it doesn't cause that much extra work. Just save the things that you that you don't like. But when you see something that is obviously not good, then you should kill your darlings.
Yeah.
I have one very short story. I was at a situation in my book where I basically had a meltdown and I thought it was just awful, and I was ready to scrap the whole thing. And I realized I was in a writing class as well, and I was talking to my professor, and she said, you're in the I suck phase. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do in the I suck phase? She's like, you just keep going. And I think part of it is that imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough. Who is going to read this book? It's like, I'm not a writer. So it's part of it is believing and getting over that initial hump and seeing where it goes once you break past those barriers. But one resource that I found really helpful is the book Wild Ideas by Kathy Wild. It's about creativity from the inside out, and she goes through that process of getting to the I suck phase and how to get past that. So I would just recommend, sometimes I did delete whole sections, but sometimes it was my inner self trying to sabotage myself.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Abby. I was wondering if anybody would ask about that. I didn't want to derail us too much, but I think that's a really important point. After I did my first draft, and I actually did a lot of my own editing, I had beta readers read it, and then I did put it aside for several years, for about 2.5 years, and I spent a lot of time researching publishing and sort of the business of publishing and the logistics and all of that. But a lot of what I was doing was soul searching about, do I need to publish this book? Does the world need this book? It was kind of on an unconscious level. And I think everybody needs to wrestle with that and come to the conclusion that the only person that can write your book is you. So thank you for mentioning that, and I'll have to look up the book Wild Ideas. But yeah, I'm glad. I just want to support everybody in doing that, because it's a fundamental point.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. I want to make sure, like, Tina, I'm not sure if you have any questions, or Sarah, give you guys all an opportunity to ask. It sounds like we have such a great interest in this writing, and I'll call upon you guys as well. I feel like we should have a follow-up to all of these discussions, right? This was just kind of uncovering the first draft, as the title has suggested, and it sounds like we can definitely take this a little bit further in another hour type of meetup in future months, talking about the editing process, the marketing process, the publishing process, self-publishing versus finding a publisher, etc. Like, there's so many options. I love the idea of what you were mentioning, Beverly, about the soul searching, right? Like, so much of this could also be healing. And then what is that next phase of getting that out there, and not helping just yourself through the writing process, but a greater cause. So I love that. And Sarah, how are you guys doing?
Good. This has been great.
Good.
It has been great. I want to show my book cover, because
Oh yes, please.
Yes.
and just as a reminder, it is really wonderful. to hold your book, your published book, in your hand, and all this pain and so forth is worth it if you're proud of it.
Yes.
So
Carol, can you hold it closer?
can I do that?
Yeah. So Carol's book
There
is
you go.
Side
It's
Effects.
called Side Effects, the art of
Beautiful.
surviving
Beautiful.
cancer, and I hope I'll get the same artist to do a different cover for this one that's coming up. Anyway, it was really a pleasure, and maybe we can revisit this topic in a different aspect. But I really appreciate Beverly and Leslie being here and their process too. And I salute all of you for beginning the project and
Mhm.
going. It's worth it.